terrorist attack where a pub gets blown up and lots of people tragically get killed is very different to what happened in Israel on October the 7th. And the point I'm trying to make to you is if bands of foreign terrorists from an identifiable nearby location had invaded our country, killed over 1,000 people, wounded over 7,000, had dragged off women and grandparents and babies and held them in cages over the border, would you not be demanding that Keir Starmer or whoever is the prime minister at that time do everything possible to get those people back, to destroy the people who did this? Wouldn't you?
Sure. And then when, 2 years later, nearly, they hadn't got the hostages back, they had killed up to 100,000 people, including 2/3 of those at least being civilians, 20,000 plus children, and we had destroyed 70% of the country where these terrorists came from. Right? What do you think the British people would have responded with?
I don't know.
Remember, we attacked Afghanistan. We know how the British people responded. They didn't like it. They didn't like Iraq, right? The British people do not respond to what they think is unfairness.
Americans liked Afghanistan. They did.
Not so much anymore.
They were, of course, 20 years later.
Right.
Whoa. Okay, so Piers Morgan is apparently getting grilled on Triggernometry. And the only reason I know this podcast is because Bassem Youssef was on it and schooled both of them before. What I know about these guys is that that guy in the maroon, he's like a very big Zionist. And the guy in the blue, he's pretty much useless, bro. He's like some British guy. He barely says anything. So let's see what happens here. Piers Morgan is being pro-Palestine here so far from what I can tell. I'm actually excited to see his viewpoints. And yeah, I think he made a great point so far. Like, we know that how our countries would respond to these. We wouldn't be happy. And yeah, so that hypothetical from the Zionists makes no sense right now.
My point is, when you are in that situation,
you can whip your people into thinking anything.
Well, I don't think Afghanistan people. I don't necessarily think it was it was done in the right way. I'm just saying, when you are attacked in the way that America was attacked on 9/11,
it's a perfectly reasonable question. I think
we would have been okay with it.
I don't think 2 years later the British public would be remotely happy with what is happening.
I also hate the fact that people constantly compare Israel to the United States. They are not the United States. We are the superpower in this world. They are our baby. We pay for them. We pay all their bills. They're like the 18-year-old who still lives with his parents, right? We do everything for them. We give them the weapons. They are not America. We are America. We could do what we want, even though it's not right. But like, we have the power to do that. Israel does not. They ain't the superpower here.
Don't. I really don't, and I do buy into the explanation that some Israelis have put to me that the country is still in trauma, and that when people are feeling traumatized, they can often react in an irrational way to how they would normally. So I do think what you're seeing is a massively over. How would you best categorize it? I don't want to offend people's sensibilities about the way I term this. I just think the reaction is massively disproportionate, and it's fueled by rage and revenge. And I think that has played into the deliberate Hamas trap, which is this is what they wanted Israel to do.
It's counterproductive.
I think ultimately it's been counterproductive. Whether you support their right to do it, the right to continue doing it or not, no one can argue that it's worked. So if it hasn't worked, at some point you have to stop. Otherwise, you just carry on just killing people.
So something Piers Morgan did not mention is fueled by rage and revenge and all of that. That's true, but also the big thing he forgot is that this has been their plan all along. Israel has been trying to make the greater Israel map forever, and no one believed it. People thought it's a conspiracy theories. The whole Arab world knew. Everyone in the Arab world knew this. Palestinians knew, Jordanians knew, everyone knew this is what Israel wants to do, and no one in the Western world believed it, and now Israel's literally taken over Gaza. Also, gotta point out, Piers Morgan, I am so not used to you being so casual. Like, brother, button up your shirt. Like, I like you in the suit and the coat and whatever. This looks a little different. Make sure you like this video and subscribe. Let's continue.
And making your country more and more isolated and loathed. And I don't want that for the Israeli people.
Piers, would you describe this as being a genocide now?
Yeah, what I said on that is certainly a lot of people like Smodrich talk in genocidal language. Certainly an unbelievable number of innocent people have been killed as they've gone after Hamas. Is it a genocide? We can't be sure until the international media are allowed in to see what's actually happened, is my argument. I'm not prepared to declare something a genocide based on what I see on TikTok. It is scandalous that the Israeli government continues to ban Western international journalists from going in. It's scandalous. It's unprecedented. We've never seen this. And what happened immediately after October the 7th? The Israeli government invited the world's media to the kibbutzes to see the mayhem.
But there is a slight difference because
there is.
Because when you invite people into the kibbutz, you're not putting journalists in physical danger.
They don't care about journalists' safety. They've already killed 250 plus Palestinian journalists in Gaza. There's no way anyone can argue to me that the Israeli government cares about the health and safety of journalists.
No, they don't care about the health and safety. They don't want to be blamed for them being killed. Ukraine doesn't allow journalists.
They don't care about being blamed for killing 250 Palestinian journalists.
Wow, this is a side of Piers Morgan I have never seen before. I'm liking it. He's really defending the Palestinian side and what all the crap that the Israelis are doing. And not only did they kill a Palestinian journalist, I'm pretty sure they've killed American journalists too. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Different. They're already there.
Well, it's fine, but there's no other war zone where you've had a complete blanket ban.
In Ukraine, you can't go on the front line if you're a journalist. Front line. And all of Gaza is a front line.
Well,
it is.
It's not.
It is.
Of course it isn't.
What do you mean?
All of Gaza is not a front line.
It's a tiny area.
Unless you pretend it's a front line.
Tell me more. Maybe I'm misinformed.
I'll tell you what. No, you're not misinformed, but I think that all the war correspondents I've talked to say this is unprecedented, right? They all say that there's only one reason the Israeli government doesn't want journalists into Gaza. Because it doesn't want the world to see what it's been doing.
That's kind of, I mean...
There's one way to prove it wrong.
But hold on, Piers, but the world is seeing what's happening in Gaza. Isn't exactly the way that you said. Everyone's got a camera phone now.
They have, but that to me is not easily verified.
Every day, if you want to know what's happening in Gaza, there's no shortage of videos.
No, you can see what people are claiming is happening. You can't be sure about the veracity of this stuff.
Exactly, because when your average Joe Schmo Palestinian posts a video of, these children dying looking for their parents, it's heartbreaking. But what does Israel do? Oh, Hamas propaganda. We need independent media in there to be like, hey, this is what's going on, and no one can deny it, not even Israel.
Yeah.
So you need proper international journalists with great experience of war zones to go in and do their jobs. It will be the job of their own employers to decide about the risk assessment. They'll go with their own security teams. Everything else. The idea the only journalists allowed in are pro-Israeli government journalists who go embedded with the IDF for a few hours and say, nothing to see here, Gov, is ridiculous. If you've nothing to hide, let them in. Let them do their job.
Do you not think that they are terrified of the idea that, a member of CNN gets killed and then suddenly they've lost even more?
Rat's shit.
No, I don't think they care about the journalists necessarily. I think...
Ooh, okay, Mr. Morgan.
They care about the PR.
More journalists have been killed in
the PR
Gaza, more Palestinians than any other war in modern times.
I hear you, but those are Palestinian people who are already there. They're not going to be...
They're journalists.
Right. You're not hearing me. Just answer my... I'm not trying to argue with you for the sake of arguing. I'm genuinely interested in your perspective. Do you not think that what Israel really cares about is the potential PR disaster that happens, A, if a member of CNN or the Daily Mirror or whoever gets killed in an airstrike because they happen to be standing next to something, or, as is also, I think you'd agree, likely, Hamas orchestrates some kind of event where that journalist is killed, and that is a PR disaster for Israel, and that's why they don't want journalists.
No, I don't.
Why not?
I just don't think that's remotely...
Do you not think that's a rational explanation?
No.
I feel like they don't care about their PR right now. They know United States is always going to be behind their back, giving them money, giving them weapons. They're doing whatever the heck they want. They've killed American citizens. Like, you care about... So, does the value of the American not matter? It only matters if they're like a news person? Like, there's a lot of Americans that have died at this point. Citizens. But, Israel only cares if there's like some news anchor from CNN? That's pretty messed up if that's what you think.
For the simple reason they've already killed 250 Palestinian journalists. They don't care about journalists. They just don't want journalists.
But that's not a PR disaster.
They don't want the journalists to see what they're doing. So the big question then becomes, why? Why doesn't Netanyahu want journalists in Gaza to verify all these stories of starving Palestinians stampeding for fragments of food and getting shot dead on a daily basis? 1,000 plus now, according to almost every official body, have been killed in these food lines.
News article came out last night, like 8 hours ago, 7 hours ago, that more, like dozens of people got killed again in these food areas.
Right? And the belief is it's the IDF killing them. Well, there's one way to verify this. Let the journalists go and investigate and do their job. I think we're going to uncover, in answer to your point, I think we're going to uncover a lot of war crimes at the end of this, which will be a stain that Israel, because of its government's actions, may find extremely hard to ever wash away. And I think that's a tragedy for Israel, who had everyone's support, not everyone's support, let me clarify that, who had broad support internationally after October the 7th, with, unfortunately, a lot of appalling. I mean, I remember walking down Kensington High Street near the Israeli embassy a day after, and there were large numbers of people in the street, cheering and all this.
Celebrating.
They were celebrating. It was sickening, right? So it brought out a lot of anti-Semitism, which was disgusting. It made Jewish people's lives less safe, which was disgusting. But I would argue now that the actions of the Israeli government, the longer this goes on, are having the same effect. I think they are leading to a rise in anti-Semitism, and they are leading to a rise in less safety for Jewish people around the world. So, again, I think they've played into Hamas's trap. And I think that's a great shame. And they should stop it. This war should just be stopped. And they should just politically end this. No one thinks Hamas can come back. I mean, no Palestinian guest I've had thinks Hamas will ever govern again in any way. So that's all been agreed by the Arab countries. So for God's sake, stop the killing, get everyone together, get Arab pressure now to help sort this. But this idea that Israel can simply kick every Palestinian out of Gaza and take it over, that should send a shudder down everyone's spine.
Well, a few things I'm going to say right there. So first of all, I'm a little disappointed in Piers Morgan for not calling it a genocide. I'm actually still a little confused on why calling it a genocide is such a big deal. You hear a lot of Israelis and Zionists say that, oh, do you even know the definition of genocide? I don't know why this has become an argument. And also, why don't they want to be on the record of calling it a genocide? Like, would you rather have the opposite be true, where you don't call it a genocide and it's most likely a genocide? I mean, I know it's a genocide, but like in the history books, it's going to be called a genocide. And then it's like, oh, that guy, Piers Morgan, he refused to call it a genocide. Like, it's just silly. I also want to say, I don't think Israel fell into the hands of Hamas. Like, their idea where, oh, we're just going to trigger them and then they're just going to be attacking and it's going to be a huge failure in the media for Israel. I think Israel just took this as a good excuse, as a good reason to just take over Gaza. And many people said this very early on that, hey, now that Hamas attacked them, they're just going to use this as an excuse and just destroy Gaza, which they did, and just take it over, which, Netanyahu just announced that they're going to do. So I just think they don't care what anyone thinks.
I can't imagine the international community would allow that to happen, Piers.
It's not doing a lot to stop it.
People who say, Piers, and maybe I got this wrong, but the last ceasefire was broken by Hamas, was it not?
According to Israel.
And the last offer of a ceasefire was not accepted by Hamas.
I don't really believe much that either Hamas or the Israeli government now say, if I'm honest. They all blame each other all the time for absolutely everything. The IDF says that every single atrocity that happens is Hamas's fault. Hamas say that everything that happens that's bad is the IDF's fault. So again, there is a way to get through this. Let independent journalists come in and find out. That's the way that you get through the lies and the bullshit on both sides.
But what about the ceasefire, though? Because people are trying to get a ceasefire together,
Sure.
and Hamas is not accepting it. By the reports of those people.
Says the Israeli government.
No, it says the Americans.
Well, there was a report recently that Smodrich last year, a year ago, made it clear to Netanyahu if he did the ceasefire deal then that was on the table, which is a big significant one with a view to ending the war, then he would resign and bring down the government. So they didn't do it. Now, that was well sourced. If that's what happened, it's disgraceful, right? These guys, Smodrich and Ben-Gvir, don't want this war over. They want to cleanse Gaza of the Palestinians.
Do you think Netanyahu wants it to be over?
No, I don't.
Have you tried to...
Wow, when did I guess I missed this. When did Piers Morgan become so pro-Palestinian and totally anti-Israel? Why isn't he like this on his own podcast? I think I know why. I think he likes to, take both sides of the aisle just to keep the debate going and get more views.
Invite him on your show?
Yeah, I interviewed him a few months before October the 7th when he came to London. And it was when he was taking on the Supreme Court and trying to reduce their power in Israel. And there were mass protests from Israeli people then. He was very unpopular. And I did about a 30, 40-minute interview with him. One of his ministers resigned while we were doing it. So he was in big political trouble. And I'm afraid the cynic in me would suggest that Netanyahu has seen a poll boost from warfare, whether it's against Hezbollah, against Iran, whether it's been against Hamas. I think he's become a war-mongering prime minister who thinks that there's no real upside to him in ending this anytime soon, because when he does, he will be held accountable for October the 7th, and he will end up in a criminal court for corruption. None of that is good if you're Benjamin Netanyahu. There's no obvious incentive to end this war.
There is going to be war fatigue. There is going to be a time when the Israeli people go no more.
There's no actual sign of that. And that's what's really baffling and concerning to me.
Yeah, I just watched a video yesterday where 30% of people in Israel just want to take over. What was it, 70%? 70% think there's no innocent Palestinians. 30% just want to take over Gaza, commit genocide. It was some crazy poll I saw.
And I do wonder about, said this on my show last night, what media do they watch in Israel? Because Israelis I meet here are pretty horrified by what's happening. And even the ones who are very supportive to start with have moved. Right? I don't really meet many Israelis outside of Israel. I'm going to New York end of this week. It'll be interesting there. Obviously, they had more Jews in New York than any other place than Tel Aviv, right? It'd be interesting there what the feeling is on the streets there. But again, I'm hearing from Jewish friends in New York, they don't like this. They just don't see an end to it or what the point of all this is anymore.
That's really the issue is.
There's no end game from what the Western media thinks, but everyone knows that the end game was take over Gaza, and sadly, West Bank is next.
It's becoming quite difficult to see what the point
Yeah.
is at this point. And
Unless it is what Smodrich says it is. I think there's been any proportionality now in Israel's response.
well, what
I
I'm
mean, 1,200 people got killed.
what I'm asking you
over
is-
the 7th. We're now up to maybe as many as 100,000.
But Piers, with all respect, that's a terrible argument. Because,
Is it?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it?
that's a terrible argument.
I don't think it is.
It is, because way more Germans were killed at the end of World War II than British people were killed, and yet we bombed Germany into the ground because we were defeating them, right? I think that is a terrible argument, but I'm trying to find out why you say it's indiscriminate. Indiscriminate means they don't care if they're just bombing a civilian building, they're just trying to flatten Gaza. Is that what you think is happening?
70% of Gaza has been flattened.
Yes.
In what way would you not think that suggests a degree of indiscriminate bombing? I absolutely support Israel at the start of this with their, not just right, but their duty to defend Israelis from any further attacks by Hamas. Unquestionably. What happened on October the 7th, one of the worst things I've ever had to report on in my life as a journalist.
Yeah, and that always pissed me off that Piers Morgan will say, oh, Israel has a duty to defend itself and its homes. Why don't the Palestinians get the same right? Why don't they have a duty to defend their homes when it gets taken over by these settlements?
But that does not give them the license now, where we are right now, to just continue slaughtering so many children in particular on a daily basis as they go after. I don't know how many Hamas are left. I mean, the American intelligence says for every one they're killing, there are 5 more coming through with the same ideology. How could it not be that? I mean, given the scale of carnage in Gaza right now, how do they think Israel, the government, not the people, but how does the Israeli government think this is going to make anything safer for Israelis? It's not. Is it going to make life safer for Jews around the world? It's not. It's going to make it more dangerous. Have they got the hostages out? No. Is there indiscriminate bombing that's going on day after day after day after day? Is that likely to end up with other hostages of the remaining hostages who are alive? And of course they should be released. But we're dealing with a terrorist group. But are they going to be more at risk from this relentless bombing that's going on or not? I would say they are. So I just put it all together and I can't defend this. And I've noticed we're having more and more trouble getting pro-Israeli voices on who are prepared to actually unreservedly defend this.
That stupid pro-Zionist guy, he kind of pissed me off when he said, oh, do you really think Israel is being indiscriminate? Of course they are. What do you call it when a government's killing like so many people and a third of them or more are most likely civilians and so many of those are women and children? Of course that's indiscriminate. Also, if there's some Hamas terrorists in like some building, they just blow up the whole building with many other people inside. How's that not indiscriminate? This guy's an idiot, blind idiot.
There are some, but a lot of the ones that were very vocal to start with no longer want to do it. And I just wonder what the average Israeli thinks about what is happening in their name. Because if this was happening here, I can assure you that the British people would not put up with it. They just would not accept this being done in their name. It is unconscionable, the scale of what's going on there. They are destroying the whole of Gaza, and they want to displace every Palestinian into neighboring Arab countries. I mean, I don't know what you two think of that, but are you comfortable with them doing that?
Well, I'm not comfortable with the scale of the casualties that are happening. I don't think anybody is comfortable with that, Piers. It's obviously awful.
Your buddy in the Burgundy's coat over there, he's perfectly fine with it. He doesn't think it's indiscriminate at all.
I guess my question to you is, what should Israel do in this instance? Because you have Hamas, who are a terrorist organization, who are fundamentalist in their nature, who will not capitulate, who will not surrender, who are very happy and delighted, let's be honest, to put their own civilians and their own family members, in fact, in the way of fire. So you have an enemy that will not surrender at any point, who will always remain a direct threat to you. So what should Israel do in that instance?
Well, look at what they did with Hezbollah. You have a very similar ideology to Hamas. Right? What do they do with Hezbollah? They planned meticulously one of the most brilliant strategic military campaigns against a terror group ever seen, where for many years they formulated a plan to get pages into their hands and other devices which exploded at a signal. And they took out 3,000 of them. Right? Unbelievably surgical in its precision. Look at what they did with Iran. Right? They didn't just indiscriminately start bombing Tehran. They, again, had a very well planned out campaign, short, in Iran, against the nuclear scientists, against the nuclear program, against nuclear sites. They persuaded the Americans to come in. It was all over in 10 days. Everyone was presuming it would be like apocalyptic World War III. Never happened. So Israel has unbelievable resources, militarily, intelligence through Mossad and others. No one can tell me that any of this makes sense. And I'll go back further to the start of all this, 2005-6, when Hamas were given power in Gaza and Israel pulls out. From that moment on, Israel, through Netanyahu, funneled billions of dollars to Hamas, right? They used most of that money to build a very sophisticated underground tunnel system for 20 years. Then 3,000 of them on October the 7th pour over the border in 3 waves over a number of hours. They kill 1,200. They wound nearly 7,000. They kidnap over 250. How did Mossad not know any of this was going to happen? These are the people that can put 3,000 pages into Hezbollah hands.
Exactly. Israel definitely has a capability to do it. I mean, what they did with Hezbollah and Iran, these are great examples by Piers Morgan. They have the capability. They're choosing not to. Now it's your job as a viewer to put 2 and 2 together and wonder, why is Israel choosing not to be more careful? Why are they indiscriminately killing everyone in Gaza? Why are they leveling it? 2 and 2.
These are the people that can be so precise in Iran. So no one can tell me that this makes any sense. I think I read some of the 5-6 times as many bombs have been dropped in totality than the total power of the 2 nuclear bombs dropped in Japan. I mean, you know, what is indiscriminate? To me, you can argue that indiscriminate means you don't care at all. I wouldn't go as far as that.
Okay.
But I would say that the way they have gone about targeting sometimes individual members of Hamas that they believe are in a cafe, and they just blow the whole cafe to pieces, that shows in my opinion, a reckless disregard for civilian life that is around that one person. And again, I come back to the Hezbollah thing. Why is it that they can target Hezbollah and dismantle Hezbollah in such a brilliantly sophisticated surgical strike manner, which does not involve destroying Lebanon or wiping out 100,000 Lebanese people, you know, killing 20,000 Lebanese children? Why is it they're capable of that there, but they're completely incapable of any other war strategy here, when most people believe, who know Hamas, that this was all part of Hamas's plan, that they knew when they did what they did, this is what would happen?
The argument would be, and by the way, I have family who come from Lebanon, is that Hezbollah are concentrated in one particular part of Lebanon. They're not concentrated.
But Israel didn't blow it up.
But if you look at Gaza, it's very, very densely populated, and Hamas are physically embedded within that.
Sure.
They have consciously embedded themselves, as we all know, within the civilians.
Sure.
So it's almost impossible to be able to target them.
But if Hamas is showing such a spectacular disregard for its own civilian life, then I would argue that you should always, if you're in Israel's position as the only democracy in the region, and you've got the biggest military in the region, it's even more incumbent on you not to be as reckless with civilian life as the people that you're going after. Right? And no one can say to me that this has been a successful strategy. It's made Israel more and more hated. Right? This is indisputable. It's true. I don't hate Israel, and I certainly don't hate Israeli people, and I certainly don't hate Jewish people. One of the problems with this whole debate is that every time you criticize the Israeli government, which is probably the most far-right government in totality in Israel's history, by the way, is that somehow that makes you anti-Semitic.
Yeah, people really need to stop doing that. It's so stupid. It's really counterproductive and very unwise.
It really is, and actually it's completely self-defeating because no one now believes it anyway. So I just think you've got to have grown-up discussions about it.
The weight of being called anti-Semitic is just gone. Like, it's like a casual Friday. Everyone just gets called anti-Semitic online now. It means nothing anymore, and you know, it's their fault for using it so lightly.
And like I say, as you know, right, for a long, long time, I was getting attacked by the pro-Palestinian side for supporting Israel's right to defend itself. I make no apology for that. And I've been attacked by extremists on both sides relentlessly. But I can't be both things that they say. You know, I can't be a Zionist, genocidal supporting monster and at the same time be an anti-Semitic Jew hater.
Welcome to the internet, Piers. But yeah, look, we're in agreement over that. And look, one of the things that I find really interesting is you using the term far right to describe the Israeli government. Why do you use that term?
Because even people that I think are pretty right-wing who come on my show now distance themselves from Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. They're too right-wing even for the right-wingers who come on, who I think are pretty right-wing.
Not even right-wing. I would call them more religious fanatics. Religious fanatics, they're extremists. They want to destroy everything around Israel and just take it over because that's what the scriptures say. And then they're even ordering these weird cows from Texas. They are real extremists out there in the government of Israel. It's scary.
And that's the honest truth. And when that happens, there are very few Israelis now who will say they support Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. They always, what they try and do,
Honestly, I would compare it to like someone in the KKK just being in the U.S. government. Like literally, like that David Duke guy. Oh yeah, he's just the president's right hand man. Like that's what it reminds me of.
Diminish their involvement. They say they're not part of the war cabinet. It's meaningless. They're senior members of this government. The only reason Netanyahu is prime minister this time round, the only way he got power back was to get into bed with people that ideologically and politically he had never been in bed with before. Real hard right extremist headbangers. Let's not sugarcoat.
Yeah, the issue there is that even if it's true what people say, and I think it is.
But you know, the problem is the fact that he was able to win with them just shows you where the population is in Israel. I mean, sad to say, a lot of the Israelis probably agree with the government and want what the government wants. I think American Israelis are a lot more distancing themselves. I think a lot of the Israelis that live in Israel, I don't know. I think they agree.
It's true that they're not involved in the day-to-day decision-making of how the war goes. The problem is, if Netanyahu doesn't get rid of them, that shows a tacit acceptance of their statements. And it's very worrying, even for people who are very pro-Israel.
Of course, listen, most Israelis now distance themselves from that, but these two senior members of the cabinet. It would be like saying, if we were at war, it would be like saying, well, we can't listen to what, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves says, because she's only the Chancellor. She's not in the war cabinet. It's nonsense.
Yeah. You've interviewed a lot of people and hosted a lot of debates on this, obviously. Have you heard a credible solution to all of this?
Only political, which is the way all these things get resolved in the end.
Such as?
Well, let me give an example. It's not an exact parallel, but in Northern Ireland for 7 decades, they had the Northern Irish Troubles. I had family do tours in Northern Ireland. The loyalists were often just as bad as the IRA, right? And you had endless terrorism on both sides from extremists for a long period of time. And then in the 90s, you finally had new leadership. You had Bill Clinton in America take over as president. You had Tony Blair take over as president here, but actually John Major, to his credit, just before that had been instrumental in this too. You had Senator George Mitchell, who was brilliant at the same time. So a whole new set of fresh eyes look at this problem. And they managed to barrel their way somehow through to peace. And they ended up bringing in people like Martin McGuinness, former chief of staff of the IRA, to become credible politicians with Sinn Féin, who are now the #1 political party in the country, right? And they've got it, and they have relative peace here now in Northern Ireland, like they've never experienced in the whole time of the Troubles. So it can be done. And there you had, it's not massively dissimilar. You've got, not a massive land area, and you've got warring factions of similar people. People forget there's over 1 million Arab Israelis, right? So it can be done. I remember getting my first trip to Jerusalem to interview Netanyahu for CNN back in 2011-12. And I went with my Jewish producer, and he deliberately stopped me at a cafe en route from the airport to Jerusalem. And I looked around, I thought, it's a bit weird. I said, am I missing something? He said, what? He was laughing. I said, not half the people in here are Arabs and half Jewish. He went, yeah. I said, it isn't like 3 miles away, just like this would be completely unthinkable. He went, yeah. It was very eye-opening. You haven't been. It was that eye-opening. It's like, wow. Okay, so why can't this get resolved? So I think it can get resolved, but never while Netanyahu is leading Israel. And never, you got to remember how far back it goes with him. I've been in his office when he pointed to a picture of his brother who died in the raid on Entebbe. He was a captain in the Israeli special forces. And he teared up looking at that, right? His dad was a massive hardliner. It's in his blood. It's in his family. They've all suffered a lot of loss, as did a lot of people in Northern Ireland. But I do think the parallel with Northern Ireland is that fresh eyes came in, fresh determination, fresh will. This only gets resolved when there's a two-state solution. And does anyone seriously think Netanyahu will ever allow that? No. Does anyone think
there is no one who believes in a two-state solution anymore?
But
genuinely.
All right, but there were periods when nobody thought you'd ever get peace in Northern Ireland.
That's fair.
And I just think that it needs new leadership on the Palestinian side, new government in Israel, and you have to have a new collective will helped by other Arab countries, who I think many of them have been putting their fingers.
When he says there's no one who believes in the two-state solution, I hope he's talking about just him and the Israelis, because I think a lot of Palestinians would probably love a two-state solution. But I think the most fair would be one country, everyone gets equal rights.
Fingers in their ears, head in the sand, hoping this all goes away. Right? That has to stop too. You've got to have a different way of looking at this. But ultimately, as I say to all my Israeli guests, give me one good reason why a Palestinian should have less human rights than you. Just give me one. Give me one good reason why it's right that Israel, whether you want to call yourselves occupiers or not, had the ability the moment this war started to turn off the electricity supplies, the water supplies, the food supplies, because you do, in a way, occupy Gaza. You may not want to admit it.
In a way? You do occupy Gaza. You're just not, maybe you're not there physically, but you're everywhere around it. You control the whole thing.
You do, but you do, because you have the levers of power over everything. And again, why is that right? Would we put up with that in England if the French had that power over us? Talking about your bringing it home here, something like that happened here. Would we accept that here? Would we accept another country?
Accept an open border, mate.
Well, we do, but we don't accept another country having the levers of power over basic essentials.
It's more complicated.
Water.
Well, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Give you an example.
Right.
So the Ukraine controls the supply of water to Crimea, to the Crimean Peninsula, which they cut off immediately when the war started, right? But I take your point. And I guess I'm just curious whether you've heard. See, the Northern Ireland example, I think, is a very apt one, and I really think you're right about the power of new leadership and a different perspective. To approach things in a new way. And you saw that with Abraham, of course, by the way. Jared Kushner went around the Middle East, approached things from the ground up.
He did great.
And did a great job, right?
I don't think he did great. I think he basically just bought out everyone to kind of forget about the Palestinian problem. Be like, hey, just normalize ties with Israel. Forget about the Palestinians. They're not going to get another state. We're not sure what's going to happen with them. Most likely they're going to be kicked out. That's like the problem no one really wanted to address. I would probably say that might be a big reason why October 7th happened, because they didn't want to normalize the Abraham Accords. When you don't address the elephant in the room, that's why things like October 7th happened.
But have you heard, forget the historical analogies, have you heard a proposal of how to deal with this current situation?
Well,
that you are persuaded by?
Well, I've heard a proposal that the Americans would lead the rebuilding of Gaza, that you would have a new Palestinian election at some point, but the Hamas would not be able to field anyone, right?
So how does that work? Do they control the democracy? Do they choose who's going to be the leader? I'm not exactly sure, because I'm thinking, like, if they do vote and they do vote someone from Hamas again, are they just going to be like, oh, that's not real? I don't get it.
They're done politically, so they can have no political power or governmental
They're
power.
not going to vote for Lib Dems, I imagine.
They're not, but the Palestinian people ultimately need to lead the Palestinian, led by Palestinians. We can all agree on that, right? So I think, we haven't even touched on what's happened on the West Bank with the extremist settlers just grabbing any land they can, which is disgusting. Again, these are war crimes, right? So I see war crimes on both sides here. And so ultimately, how do you resolve this? Right? A lot of the extremists on both sides believe they have a God-given right to the land they're on, right? So you're dealing with a fundamentalist view on both sides. I don't see any real ideological difference about if one side or the other sees this as their God-given land. Okay, so that's what you're dealing with. It makes it a much more...
I don't think the Palestinians think it's their God-given land. It was their land. Like, Mehdi made a great point. He said, oh, it's crazy how, the Israelis have this right to the land from 3,000 years ago. But the Palestinians who were on this land 70, 80 years ago, they can't have that right. Like, it's just religious fanaticism from the Israelis.
Much deeper problem than you could just solve in the normal kind of geographic, political, territorial manner, if you like. I think the Ukraine-Russia thing is a much easier thing to resolve ultimately than this, because it's not based on a holy war, which makes things, as we know, historically, immeasurably more complicated. So, look, what's the answer? Ultimately, you need new Palestinian leadership that genuinely is determined to not allow the extremists like Hamas to rise again. Not easy. Easier said than done, particularly when you've just had Israel killing 70 to 100,000 people. That will cause a lot of rage, I'm sure, which I believe will come back and haunt them. I hope I'm wrong. You need the Arab leaders around, particularly in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Dubai and others, Egypt, Jordan. You need them all to get involved and to work out a way that you can create a two-state solution where the Israelis do not feel like their lives are constantly in peril, and where the Palestinians feel that they have the same human rights as their neighbors. If Israel had played this differently from the start, I think things could have been extremely different, and their reputation around the world would have been extremely different now. I think they have massively, massively overreacted in such a shockingly disproportionate manner that is ongoing, that they're losing all their friends. They're losing all their support. When even the American ambassador to Israel, who is about as pro-Israeli as you could possibly get, when even he is condemning them for criminal acts and attacking the Catholic Church there, where Pope Francis used to call every night, famously, and for attacking Christians and killing Americans. When even that's happening, right, there's a wind of change here.
I think one of the things that I take your point, what you're saying, and the historical precedents and the example, that's fair enough. But also we need to acknowledge as well the Islamic fundamentalism that lies at the heart of all of this. That is a cancer that is going to be...
That does not lie on the heart of all of this. That was an effect of the heart of all of this situation, which is the Israeli fundamentalism and the religious fanaticism. That's where it started. They came there thinking we have a holy right to this land. And that caused an effect with all these guys getting kicked out, like millions of people getting kicked out of their homes for generations, be like, hey, we got to get this back. And they made it into a holy war. But the religious fanatics from the Israeli end, they're the ones that started this. This is the heart of the problem. This problem didn't exist before they came. Duh.
Very, very difficult to get rid of. Particularly the more this war goes on, the more people become radicalized.
Just idiots, man. Both of these guys are idiots.
How do you get rid of that type of ideology?
Listen, when it comes to fundamentalist extremism, I see a lot of that on the really hardcore right side of Israel.
Yes, let's go, Piers.
Right? They sound like extremist fundamentalists. You know, I interviewed one last week, absolute crazy woman, right? Who just, kept trying to say to her, do you feel any empathy for all the children who died in Palestine? Nothing. There's nothing there at all. Not a semblance of humanity. Wants them all out, all gone, doesn't care. I was unashamed about it. Unashamed about it. That's a form of extremism.
I agree, but I also think that the Islamic fundamentalism is a heightened form of even that type of extremism.
But I don't like, look, to be clear, I don't like any fundamentalism.
No, not being saying that you do, but my point is if you were willing to put your own children and family in the way of bullets purely for your own ideology, then that is something that we really haven't seen that many times before. And how do you deal with that?
Well, we saw it with ISIS, and they got pretty well dismantled. We saw it with Al-Qaeda. They got pretty well dismantled. You know, it's not like the world is short of ideas of how to go after terror groups, right? There's plenty of history to suggest there are ways to do it, right? But I just don't know what Israel's government thinks it's now achieving. That really is the fundamental question. What are they achieving other than making Israel a more unpopular country globally and making its people more unsafe? Those are the two things I think are happening now on an increasing rate on a daily basis. So I simply say to Netanyahu, how does that work? How does that work for you, right? And if your actual plan is to get all Palestinians out of Gaza, say it and be judged accordingly. And then the world can wake up to what I think is the plan, which is the one that Smotrich has been openly talking about, which is they want to cleanse Palestine of Gaza. That's ethnic cleansing on a scale we haven't seen in modern times.